Answered in kind, 35. On prosthesis, spectacle, and the fear of the eyes. There is a peculiar temperament abroad in the world now, a temperament that mistakes abrasion for strength and derision for lucidity. It announces itself with laughter sharpened into a blade, with certainty worn like armor, with a compulsive need to declare invulnerability. Words cannot hurt me. Screams are safe. I am untouched. Though we are all one. This posture, however, betrays itself by its excess. One does not announce immunity unless one is preoccupied with injury. What we are witnessing in some people is not confidence, but hypervigilant self-sealing, a frantic attempt to cauterize vulnerability before it can even be named. At the surface level, this temperament obsesses over mockery. Whose pain counts, whose doesn't, which injuries are real, which are theatrical, which bodies deserve dignity and which deserve laughter. But this is merely the foam on the water. Beneath it is something older, quieter, and far more brittle, an unresolved terror of exposure. Human beings are social animals, yes, but long before ideology, before nationhood, before doctrine, we learned to fear the eyes. The gaze of the group has always carried the threat of expulsion. To be seen failing, confused, unformed, or contradictory was once a matter of survival. That ancient fear still lives in the nervous system, though the savannah has been replaced by comment sections and algorithmic arenas. Some people respond to this fear by hardening. They decide, often unconsciously, that it is safer to become cruel than to be seen as weak. Safer to mock than to wonder. Safer to dominate discourse than to risk being dismantled by it. They cultivate a persona of impermeability, loudly insisting that nothing touches them, that empathy is foolish, that outrage is performative, that suffering is exaggerated, that others are pretending. This is not skepticism, it is defensive dissociation. One of the more revealing traits of this psychic configuration is an obsessive attachment to literalism. Words must be frozen, definitions policed, symbols stripped of elasticity. Any attempt to expand meaning, to include, to nuance, to reinterpret is framed as deception or corruption. Why? Because symbolic fluidity threatens rigid identity. If words can evolve, then so can selves. And if selves can evolve, then the current self might be provisional, unfinished, fallible. For someone whose identity is held together by force of will rather than self-knowledge, this is intolerable. Thus, language becomes a battleground, not because meaning matters so deeply, but because control does. Adorable. To dominate definitions is to avoid introspection, to mock metaphors, to flee from ambiguity. To sneer at nuance is to protect oneself from the vertigo of becoming. There is also, in this temperament, a strange economy of pain. Suffering is weighed, compared, ranked. One injury is dismissed because another was worse. One outrage is laughed off because a more spectacular one exists elsewhere. This is not moral reasoning. It is emotional triage designed to avoid compassion. Darling. Compassion, after all, is destabilizing. It softens the borders of the self. It asks one to imagine oneself in another's position, which is precisely what this psychic structure cannot afford to do. To imagine too deeply would be to feel. To feel would be to risk fracture. So instead, pain is turned into sport. Reaction places reflection. The world becomes a coliseum of images in which the loudest laugh is mistaken for the strongest stance. At the core of all this is shame, but inverted, alchemized into contempt. Shame says, something is wrong. Contempt replies, something is wrong with everyone else. This inversion is not accidental. It is a survival strategy learned early, often in environments where vulnerability was punished, where curiosity was mocked, where failure was not permitted to be formative, but only humiliating. In such conditions, trial and error becomes dangerous. Better not to try than to be seen trying and failing. Better to sneer than to stumble. And yet, here is the paradox. The very people who most loudly denounce sensitivity are often those most governed by the fear of the eyes. They are exquisitely attuned to status, to dominance hierarchies, to who is winning and who is losing the social game. Their mockery is not indifference. It is preoccupation. Notice how often cringe appears as a judgment. Cringe is not about ethics. It is about visibility. It is the policing of aspiration, the shaming of earnestness, the punishment of those who dare to try openly. Cringe culture is the enforcement arm of arrested development. To call something cringe is to say, you revealed too much. You reached without permission. You risked the eyes. It is the voice of the internalized audience, the crowd that once laughed, the authority that once sneered. And so many decide, without ever consciously deciding, that they will never be that exposed. They will never be caught trying. They will never be seen learning. They will never be unarmored. But this comes at a cost. A life organized around not being seen failing is a life that cannot grow. It becomes repetitive, reactive, trapped in circular argument and performative certainty. It mistakes stasis for strength. Adorable. This is why contempt must escalate. It has diminishing returns. Each laugh must be sharper than the last, each dismissal louder, each assertion more absolute, because nothing new is being risked internally. Novelty must be manufactured externally through outrage, insult, spectacle. Meanwhile, the deeper questions go untouched. What might I have been if I had tried more? What capacities in me went undeveloped because I was afraid of looking foolish? What did I mock because I secretly wanted it and didn't know how to reach it? These questions are exhausting. They require humility. They require patience. They require the willingness to be a beginner. And beginners are visible. It is hard to get better when you are afraid to begin. It is easier to posture than to practice. It is tempting to let the eyes rule, to internalize their judgments until they become a silent warden. But the refusal of that slavery is the beginning of freedom. To try and to fail publicly is not weakness. It is sovereignty. To learn through repetition, through error, through awkwardness, is to reclaim authorship of one's becoming. Those who sneer at this are not strong. They are stalled. They found victory once, perhaps, through spite. They hardened themselves against ridicule and mistook that armor for selfhood. And for a while it worked, but spite is a tool, not a home. If it is not eventually set down, it calcifies into bitterness. The tragedy is not that some people are cruel. The tragedy is that they stopped trying early and now must pretend that trying itself is beneath them. There is only one of each of us, an unrepeatable individualization of the infinite. Deep comparison reveals this. Shallow comparison obscures it. Those trapped in surface-level comparison cannot tolerate singularity because singularity cannot be ranked. So they cling to sameness with dominance, to scripts and roles and identities that promise protection from the terror of being uniquely accountable for one's own life. But beneath all the noise all the mockery, all the certainty, there is often a quiet grief. I never became what I might have been. And grief, when unacknowledged, curdles into cruelty. We are here to try, to learn, to fail forward, to risk the eyes, and discover that they do not, in fact, own us. Some things take many tries. Some truths only arrive through repetition and embarrassment and persistence. And in that striving, not in dominance, not in mockery, not in spectacle, you find a meaning no ideology can provide and no book can fully extract. Those who are still afraid to try will continue to shout from the sidelines, insisting that the game is rigged, that effort is foolish, that caring is weakness. But those who step onto the field, awkward, visible, imperfect, are already freer than they know. And freedom, unlike cruelty, does not need to announce itself loudly to be real. God bless your divine presence.